Alright, so you go View Objects, Aircraft, View Object, and then you've got this expansive list that we're going to go through just now. These are all the aircraft in 46. I don't know if any of them are flyable or if they're just AI or a combination of both. My suspicion is that you can fly all of them. Certainly you can fly a lot of them. So here's an A-20C from 1941. Here's an A-20G. Looks like it's got the turret on the top there, and it's got, wow, look at those, it's got skull and crossbones. Look at those guns there. That's obviously some 50 cals. So it's got 4 50 cals in the nose, and it's got an electric turret. Compare it to the 20C, which is more old school. I won't go too in depth into each aircraft, but we're just going to sort of kind of skim the surface here. So here's a B-17G, the famous G model, with its just amazing armament, bunch of 50 cals packed into every nook and cranny, and carrying a useful bomb load. Can't even attack it from the front because it's got a 50 cal there, 50 cal there, and 2 50 cals in that chin turret. B-24, so there's 2 versions of the B-24. This one without a chin turret, you can see the bombardier there, and then this one with the chin turret. Is it a chin turret? Or nose turret. So this one's a bit newer. Alright, so those are the B-24s. Beaufighter Mark 21. Sorry, that was a B-24D and a B-24J. Beaufighter Mark 21. Mark 21 has this kind of tail. It has significant dihedral to the tail, and it's kind of a different looking tail. It almost has like it's staggered forward kind of thing, like a high performance glider wing. Anyways, that's Beaufighter Mark 21. Here's a Plenum 4 from 1939. So this is a really old school plane, which was basically cannon fodder for any Luftwaffe aircraft. These things were really, they suffered a lot of attrition, according to the books I've read. But anyways, that's the Plenum 4. Look at this thing. Wow, it has a rocket, a bit like an ME 163 Comet. So it has a rocket, has that kind of weird tail. It's a braced tail. I guess it get a lot of impulse going through the airframe from that rocket, and some pretty mean guns on the front. Look at that pitot tube. Kind of looks like a trident there. Exotic pitot tube. Right, so that, and it's got that thing there, opposite of a dorsal fin. So that's a BI-1 from 1942. That's very early. BI-6 from 42. From 42, is that right? Did they have a rocket? So this is a rocket and 2 jets, and so that's in 42. A C-47, the good old C-47, which is like a Douglas DC-3, but I guess it's the military transport version of the Douglas DC-3. This is an extremely classic aircraft. Check out this, a DB-3M from 1939. So this is very old school, 1939. And it looks to be kind of the genre of a Polycarpov I-16, like almost a steampunk-esque plane viewed from today's perspective. Looks like a good plane. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the same vintage technology of a Polycarpov I-16, which would be what, early 30s, very late 20s, early 30s, 1934 or something. Check this out, F2A2 from 1941. Looks like the forerunner to the eventual F8F Bearcat, going through the F4F, the F5F, the F6F, Tomcat, Hellcat, Wildcat, all of that, the carrier-borne planes. They have, look at that, it's got a window there for observation, and it's got a fuel tank there. Probably not the only fuel tank, and it has the wheels here. I'm assuming the wheels come out of the fuselage, and I would say that's for carrier-borne landings. so that you can do what would otherwise be a heavy landing when you're landing on a carrier, and the airframe absorbs the shock rather than the shock going into the wings. That's my theory anyway. F4F3, 1941. F4F, so this would be the Tomcat, I reckon. F4F Tomcat, 1941. That same kind of carrier-borne design, very sort of square, boxy wings and fuselage and everything. Looks like it has a lot of drag to it, but it has that huge engine, so there's pros and cons. A lot of drag, but a powerful engine. FM2, you can see we've barely scratched the surface. We've got all this way to go, and so many aircraft. Might have to speed up a bit. FM2, 1943. And he's got a oxygen mask on, so he's probably a bit more high performance. FM2. To me, this looks like an F5F. I reckon that's the, I don't know. Is it the Tomcat? So anyways, we'll move on. F4U Corsair. I think this is known to be the fastest propeller plane in World War II. I could be wrong. It's got the gull wing shape, so that the undercarriage, which pokes out here and here, has enough clearance to the ground to stop this massive propeller from this massive, at least twin row radial engine from striking the ground in normal operations. And this is also a carrier-borne plane. Vought F4U Corsair, an excellent carrier-based plane. That's another one, F4U1C, so that was the A and this is the C. He's got some hard points there for rockets and bombs. He's got some guns there which would have to be 50 cals, I'd say, unless they were cannon. Excuse me. I don't know if the US went for cannon, but they're either 50s or cannon. F4U1D, 1944, so this is probably the later version of all of those. More hard points. It's got like some radio stuff there. What's the difference? I don't know what's the difference, but anyways, there's 3 different models of that plane with its distinctive gull wing. F6F. Probably, I think this one has the same engine as a P-47D Thunderbolt. So, and the wheels are no longer here in the fuselage, they're now just on the wing root. A pretty good plane, this one. Not as maneuverable as as its opposing Japanese fighter, but it's so powerful. It runs on probably 150 octane fuel, has that huge engine. It's very strongly built. It's built out of heavy gauge aluminium in comparison to its opponents. Carries a lot of weapons, it's versatile, can carry, I assume it can carry bombs and rockets and that, and self-sealing fuel tanks, so it's a very kind of luxurious plane in comparison to the ones that it's opposing, but it wouldn't be able to outturn a Japanese plane mostly. But in a teamwork, this plane plus 20 other planes like it would be able to pretty much dominate the skies around an aircraft carrier. F6F3, so this is the F6F5, so that was 43, this one's 44, and what's the difference? What is the difference? I can't tell. I'm trying to look at the profile if it looks different. This one, look at the kind of straight out to where the undercarriage would be, and then you get some dihedral after that. Is that the same on this one? Probably. Yeah, it is. Alright, I'm belaboring the point. Let's move on. That was the F6F. Now for the G11. This looks like a glider, a paratrooper's glider, no doubt. You saw similar versions to this that other countries were using. The German Fallschirmjäger had this. Otto Skorzeny rescued Mussolini from the mountaintop resort where he was kept at some point, and they used gliders and the Fiesler Storch. I think they were going to use a helicopter, but they didn't use it for some reason. So anyways, and also the Allied paratroopers, the Red Devils, the British paratroopers used these kind of gliders in Operation Market Garden in, where was that? In Holland, I think. Hurricane. Here's the Hurricane 2B 1940. It's got some hard points. It's got an air intake. So this is 1940. This is probably your original Hurricane. Got some guns well outboard of the wing. Look how far out they are. Two of them clustered on those areas there, well outside of the propeller disc. And it looks like there's more. I can't zoom in more, but it looks like we've got 4 machine guns here and then an extra 2 guns on the outboard. So I'm sort of thinking, and you can see the casing ejection ports there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so 12 guns, I reckon. I reckon this Hurricane has 12 guns, which is insane. 12 303s, that would do some huge damage. Hurricane 2C 1941. Holy crap, look at those cannons. So those would be Hispano-Suiza 20mm cannons. The Hispano-Suiza, I could be totally wrong, but my impression of it is that it's a much higher muzzle velocity cannon than its German counterparts. So flatter trajectory, faster flying projectile, hits its target sooner, and that assists in accuracy and that sort of thing. So yeah, four cannons there. They'd be the 20mm Hispano-Suizas. Hurricane 2 field mod. Hopefully I'm not going through this too slowly, since there's so many aircraft to get through. I'm going to try and speed myself up a bit. So yep, there's a Hurricane 2 field mod. I don't know what the field mod is, but there it is. I-15, no, I-153 M62 1939. 1939. This thing would actually get up and boogie, but it's an interesting design, isn't it? For the, I don't know how you'd go with visibility. You could see above you, but this would be a very good turn fighter. It's basically, it looks to be an I-16 with a biplane configuration. Here is an I-16, 1939. And so there we go. I imagine this would be quite unstable in, what is it, the directional plane, like pitching, the pitching plane, because it's so short. But that would also be helpful. But you've got this huge weight here, and then you've got a short fuselage. So having said that, this plane doesn't weigh very much, and it has a significant amount of horsepower. I can't remember the figures, but I think it has 900. No, I think it has 1,300 horsepower, which is huge, and it doesn't weigh very much at all. So the power to weight ratio, it's kind of like a Lotus Elise sports car of the fighter plane world. It's light and it's powerful, so that power to weight ratio. I-16, having said that, I mean, they were shot out of the sky by the Luftwaffe. Even a Bf-110 twin-engined heavy fighter could could take out one of these. So that's another I-16. I-250, this is a weird looking bird. So it's got a propeller engine that looks a bit like a yak or something, and then it's got a jet in there somewhere, I reckon. But where's the intake for the jet? Ah, it's got to be here. Possibly. Excuse me. So you've got an intake for the jet there. You've got a propeller engine, and you've got a jet exhaust there. That's a very interesting hybrid power source aircraft. Sort of a bit along the lines of a B-36 Peacemaker. So here is a IL-2 with many hard points for rockets, and that's the flying tank. The plane is partly constructed out of steel plate armour. So rather than building an aluminium fuselage and airframe and then putting some armour on it, they built the plane out of armour in many places. I think the tailplane was not armoured, but I think the forward part of the fuselage was armoured, and there was some significant innovation there, like the radiator was actually buried in the fuselage here. You've got this huge air intake here, you've got a radiator buried here inside the plane, and you've got an S-bend of airflow, and then the air exits here. So there was some innovation to this plane. Here's another one. Gee, there's so many different variants of this plane. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Later series from 42. Is that number 8? 9, 10. Whoa, look at those. What are they? Are they the 3.7 centimetre equivalent to a Stuka with the cannon bird, the cannon Vogel? And so that was the IL-2s. This is an IL-4. Kind of reminds me of a Mitsubishi Betty bomber. Anyways, so that's that. IL-4. IL-10. IL-10 from 45. So this must be the final version of the IL-2. Looks a bit more streamlined. The cockpit is very enclosed. It's got the gunner there with a single gun. It's probably like the equivalent of a 50 caliber. So that's the final version of the IL-2, I'm guessing, the IL-10 from 45. Lag 3. Pretty self-explanatory. Good old lag 3. Lag 3, that was from 41. Lag 3 IT with a huge cannon sticking out of the propeller. Lag 3 1943, 66 series. Looks fairly potent. LA5, Lavochkin LA5. Very spacious cockpit this plane has, actually. One of the benefits to this plane is the cockpit is pretty spacious. LA5F from 1943. The canopy is looking a bit more sophisticated. So that's quite a potent plane. That's that, and then the LA5FN from 43. But all of the controls, of course, are manual. There's no automation, whereas the opponent to this, one of the Focke-Wulf FW190s, had a lot of automated systems and things like that. So LA7. So here's an LA7. Looks pretty fast. LA7 3B 20 1944. Okay, so there's a few versions of the LA. There's an LA7R 1945. Kind of a Mustang-esque air intake there. Or similar to what's on a Yak 1 series 129. What have we here? It's called an LI2 1939. It looks to me like a DC3, like a C47, probably built under license, but they've stuck a thingamajig there. They've stuck a turret there. I like how this is basically a DC3. I like how DC3s have this tiny door just here, which a pilot could probably just fit through. What do we got here? MBR2AM 34 1937. I don't believe I've ever seen this plane before, ever. Looks like it's a contra-rotating twin-engined. How many propellers does it have? Maybe it just has one propeller. I think that's just a radiator, and yeah, just one propeller. Right, so that's that. Bit reminiscent of a Walrus. MiG-3 1940, MiG-3 UD 1941. So this was high altitude interceptor. MiG-3 2 times 2X UB 1941. No, so there's a lot of MiG-3s. Another one. MiG-3 AM 38 1941. MiG-3 U 1942. This one looks a bit more, the canopy is different, more streamlined. The pilot has oxygen mask. Looks a bit more potent. So that's the 1942 model. MiG-9 from 1946. Holy crap, look at that. So this is a 1946 plane. It has 2 jet engines. and three guns. It looks like it's got a massive cannon and two also massive cannons. Wowee. It kind of reminds me of a Focke-Wulf TA 183, or was it 186? And it also reminds me of a Messerschmitt P1101. Seems to take inspiration from those planes. Here's a MiG-9 FS 1946. Same kind of deal. No swept wing yet. They haven't included a swept wing. Mohawk 4 1941. Looks like a forerunner. I think this is a Curtiss plane. Forerunner to the P-47 in some ways. It's got that same kind of P-40, Curtiss P-40 undercarriage, and this is a Mohawk 4 from 41. So Curtiss was making some pretty decent planes. P-11C 1939. I think that's a Polish Air Force. P-11, and it's got that kind of gull wing thing going on there. Huge sight there. Huge radial, kind of a naked radial. Pretty sturdy looking undercarriage. Okay, so there you go, that's a P-11C from 1939. P-36A 1938. P-36, surely this is the forerunner to the P-47. You can kind of see the I don't know, the origin, what do you call it, the genesis or something, like I don't know what the word is. This is obviously like an early incarnation of a P-47D Thunderbolt, or maybe not. I mean, Thunderbolt's made by Republic, this is a Curtiss aircraft. P-36A, anyways, there you go, there's that. P-38J, so this is the Lightning, 1943. Very, very fast plane. It set a lot of speed distance records when it first debuted. This is the type of plane that it has a lot of speed and a lot of range. You could get in a plane like this and you could pretty much fly across the United States, like from New York to Los Angeles, maybe refueling once, and you'd do it at 650 kilometers an hour the whole way, sort of thing. P-38L 1944. Bunch of 50 cals in the nose there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All on the centre line. Those kind of turbo supercharger thingamajigs there. Pretty impressive plane. And that plane, the P-38 Lightning, will be in the latest technology version of this game, IL-2 Bodenplatte, Battle of Bodenplatte, which will be, that plane will be released probably this year, 2019. Here's a P-39 Airacobra, but they're calling it a P-400. So there you go. P-39D, P-39DBE. Maybe it's a high altitude version or something, I'm not sure. P-39N, bunch of P-39s then. P-39Q from 1943, so it's a later version. It looks like it's got some massive cannons very far outboard of the wing. And it's got, so I think they've just taken 2 extra cannons like they have firing through the propeller boss there, and also some guns here. So it's got 2 guns here, probably 30 or 50 cal. It's got a huge cannon here, and that's like a pneumatically shock recoil mounted type thing cannon. It's on a shock absorber, a pneumatic shock absorber, and well, it could be a spring, but by the way the action moves in Battle of Kuban, I think it's pneumatic, and like a car's shock absorber. And then there's the same one there and the same one there, and then you got those there. So that's a heavily armed P-39Q from 1943. Here's a P-39Q from 44. It's missing the outboard guns. So that's that. P-40 from 1941. Good old P-40. And this is the one with this kind of, the way it looks here. There's me using my extensive vocabulary to kind of describe the nacelle. You'll see what I mean. That's a P-40B. P40C. Looks like they've got some kind of artwork there. P40E, and that, see, the nose is different, so compare that nose to that nose. So it's kind of like that. That's the earlier version, and then that's the later version. P40E M105 Field Mod. Alright, so this is one that has a field modification. Because it's in Soviet colours, I'm guessing it might have been something to do with coping with the cold, but who knows. P40 M42. It's got some guns in the 3 guns in each wing. Pretty cool paint scheme. So that's a P40M from 1942. P47D10 from 1943. You can see those early Curtiss planes. It really bears a strong resemblance to them. It's just bigger, longer, heavier, more powerful, flies higher and faster, but it's kind of like the same idea. And that's the Razorback instead of the bubble canopy. P47D 2744. Look at this one. I like the P47 that has the kind of extended thingamajig there on the tail. Hopefully I'll be able to show that, although I think that's the end of the P47s. 850 calibers in the wings. A very classic high altitude escort aircraft, and it's multi-role too. This one has the hard points on the wings. P51B NA 1943. Early P51 without the bubble canopy. So that's that. P51C. Again without the bubble canopy, but they've accommodated taller pilots by giving a bulge to the canopy here. So that's that, which is a innovation from the Spitfire. P51D 20NA 1944. There's your quintessential Mustang right there. Very sleek, streamlined plane. P63 C5 1944. P63. So this is obviously a P39 Airacobra that's had some extensive modification done to it. And it's from 1944. Wowee, I'd never seen this one before. This would probably be a pretty decent fighter plane. Alright, so that's the 63. PBN Nomad 1943. This is clearly a PBY Catalina. And they're calling it a PBN Nomad. These are amazing amphibious planes. They have wheels, like they have a tricycle undercarriage. At least maybe this one doesn't, but most of them do. And they can float and they can fly. So they're truly amphibious aircraft, and they're very long range. You can fly these over great oceanic distances. And if you need to refuel, you can just park the plane on the ocean in calm water, meet up with a refueling boat, a ship, get some fuel, and then keep going. PE2, we're almost there. PE2 1940 Series 1, so that's the PE2. PE2 84. PE2 1942. So this is kind of like your light bomber. Kind of equivalent to a Mosquito, only Mosquito is made of plywood and it's very fast, and whereas this one is made of metal, aluminium, and it's still pretty fast though. PE3 1941, PE3 BIS 1941, PE8 1940, and that, what does that look like? Looks like my first impression was Lancaster. I guess I'm trying to compare it to aircraft that I know. And now I'm looking at this tailplane. This looks like a HE-177. The Heinkel HE-177's tailplane. This here looks like a B-17. The wing kind of reminds me of a B-17 or a Lancaster. So this is a kind of an interesting plane here. And it's got some undercarriage sticking out of behind the engines there. So that's obviously like a heavy bomber. When's it from? 1940. From 1940, so it's a very early aircraft. RE-10, 1940. This looks to be one of those many planes that there was such a proliferation of aircraft in World War II that so many of them I've never even really seen before, and this is one of them. Looks to be probably a dive bomber, I would say. The pilot has a huge scope here, and there's a turret. SB-2M100A, 1937, 41 series. I think we saw a similar plane to this earlier, only maybe with a turret up here or something. So there's that. 1937, that's an old school plane. SB-2M 1938, SB-2M 1939, SB-2M 1940, SBD-3 1942. This is the SBD Dauntless. When I was a kid, I used to mispronounce this and call it a Duntleys, but it's a Dauntless. SBD Dauntless. And this is a dive bomber. You can see the flaps are perforated to double as air brakes or something along those lines. Geez, that's a weird looking. I didn't know that. Is that for real? Surely they have some split flap arrangement or something where you can put down flaps or you can put down the perforated air brake. No, it looks like it's just where the flap should be, they've just got a perforated air brake, and then they've got an air brake here. I would expect that they'd have flaps, proper flaps somewhere, but no. Never really scrutinised this plane in detail, although I do like it. It looks like it's got a trapeze here for swinging a bomb out, a bit like a Stuka, exactly like a Stuka. So this one was, I think it was carrier borne. It's got that undercarriage that probably braces itself on the fuselage rather than the wings, and it's from 1942. So that's an SBD Dauntless. Seafire, 1943. Seafire, so that's a Spitfire, probably for an aircraft carrier, or I don't know. Looks like it's in the Far East markings, or even Australian markings. The Australian markings and the Far East markings of the RAF are very similar, so it could be either. Spitfire FVB early 1941, VB early 1941 with the Hispano-Suiza cannons. There is your VB. Quite a plane. TB3 4M17 1933. Jeez, look at this thing. That is amazing. This is 1933, so this is obviously your heavy bomber. It looks a bit like a Handley Page, or like, you know, the kind of category that you would call it. Somewhere across between a more modern heavy bomber like a B-17 or a Lancaster and one of the archaic, antiquated early stage bombers like a Handley Page or an Ilya Murmats, which was a giant, or a Zeppelin aircraft, or a Gotha heavy bomber from World War I, which of course were all biplanes, but this seems to be the next evolutionary step up from the biplane heavy bomber. Look at that undercarriage, poised, ready to spring forth when it lands. 4 engines, huge wing area. 2 gunners, one facing back, one facing forward. I think those guys could swivel around 360. 2 pilots and a gunner up the front. Looks like there's someone down here as well. Maybe. He'd probably be the bombardier. So there you go, that's a gigantic bomber from 1933. TBF-1, 1942. This is the TBF Avenger, Grumman TBF Avenger. George Bush Sr. flew this plane in World War II. President George Bush Sr. was a combat pilot, and he actually flew this plane in World War II. This is a torpedo plane, fought in the Pacific. It's carrier borne. It's a big, beefy plane. It's a huge plane considering it's a single engine plane. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 people on board. I believe it'd have the same engine as a P-47D Thunderbolt. And I've seen one of these flying in real life, and they fly very well. They've got huge, thick, cambered wings, so they produce a lot of lift, and they make a great din, a great sound when they fly. This is one of my favourite aircraft of all time. It's a torpedo bomber, so you've got this long bomb bay here. I think it extends even up to just behind the engine firewall, all the way back to here, and then behind it you've got a tail gunner, and you'd chuck a torpedo or two in there, and you'd go and find a Ichiban Maru or something, like a Japanese warship, and you'd try and sink it. So that's the TBF Avenger. TBF 1C 1943, same sort of deal. Carrier-borne aircraft. This one has a 4-leaf clover. What a plane, huh? What an amazing plane. TBM3 1943. Got some hard points on the wings. Very wide track undercarriage. TU2S 1943. U2VS 1936. Ah, yeah, okay, so here's this one. The U2 with like 100 horsepower engine, and it was a trainer and a airborne ambulance and a general purpose aircraft. You could almost call it the equivalent of the, not really, but almost call it the equivalent of the Fiesler Storch, which was a famous short takeoff and landing liaison and recon aircraft. What do we got here? A Yak or a Lag? Yak 1. Yak 1B, 1942. That's a very potent plane in the latest version of the game. Probably the one of the best dogfighters in the game. Very fast, very manoeuvrable. Yak 3, 1944. Very distinctive wing shape. Yak 3 with a bubble canopy from 1945. Almost reminiscent of a Spitfire Mark 14 in some aspects. Yak 3R. Look at that staggered kind of tail there. That's from 44. It's interesting to see the evolution of the aircraft throughout the war, the different variations getting more and more capable and potent as the years go on. That's a Yak 7, Yak 9, Yak 9, Yak 9D, Yak 9K. That looks like an incredibly beefy cannon at the front there with a muzzle brake and maybe another gun just here. So the Yak had like a machine gun here and a cannon here. That was its kind of classic layout. The cannon had like not many rounds at all, like maybe less than 60 rounds, like maybe it was less than that, maybe it had like 20 rounds or something. So you had a huge gun but not many rounds, and then you had a machine gun. Yak 9T. I think the design philosophy of the Yak was a very lightweight airframe, not much weight, no armour, no self-sealing fuel tanks, no armour, no luxuries. So very lightweight, very manoeuvrable, strong enough, but not very strong for battle damage, and then a nice cannon and a machine gun. So very light armament in a way, although it is firing on the centre line, and then not even much ammo for the guns. So all of it kind of in aid of getting behind a Messerschmitt or an FW, getting behind a target and shooting it down. So in that sense, it didn't matter if it didn't have any armour. The idea was, it's sort of a Mitsubishi A5M0, was it A6M0, Mitsubishi Zero design philosophy. Very lightweight and able to outmaneuver its opponent. That was the design philosophy, which is all good as long as you don't get hit by your enemy's bullets, because then you'll have no armour. So what's this? A Yak 9U 1944. It's a pretty good looking aircraft. Looks a bit like a Mustang or a late Spitfire. Very streamlined. Yak 15, 46. Holy crap. So yeah, that's amazing. They've literally just taken a Yak and chopped off the reciprocating piston engine off the front there and stuck a jet engine on the front. And this one's from 46. And it looks like it's kind of like got a Messerschmitt ME262 engine on the front there. And it looks like, I mean, it's a practical idea. Just take an existing fighter plane, chop off the engine that you don't want, and put on the engine that you do want, and Bob's your uncle. You've got a jet fighter, because the wing is not swept at all like a 262 or what have you, or an ME-163 Comet. This is exactly the same airframe as the propeller plane, just they've stuck a jet engine on the front. And the one downside to that, of course, is that a jet engine weighs nowhere near as much as what a piston engine weighs. So piston engine here is going to be like 1,500 kilograms of weight just here, whereas a jet engine here is probably going to be about 450 kilograms of weight. So it weighs about a third, in my opinion, of what a piston engine is going to weigh. And this is designed to be a piston engine fighter with a lot of weight up the front, and the wings correspondingly straight, not swept, and moved rather far forward. So to make this plane work properly, I mean, jet engines are so light, you can even take a jet engine and accommodate it back here somewhere. Like, yeah, the heavy thing with jet engines is the fuel. Where are you going to store the fuel? So weight and balance wise, I don't know how this would have gone. There's ways you can get around it. You can adjust the trim tabs and stuff, and you can put some weight in the nose. But yeah, anyways, I'm not going to belabor the point. That's the last one. This is the last one. This is the P-80. The Lockheed, is it Lockheed or is it Northrop? I think it's Lockheed, and it's the Shooting Star Lockheed. So it's the YP-80 from 1944. This was like a proof of concept jet plane for the US Air Force. It was not very powerful, it was not very fast. I think its maximum speed was pretty low, like 600 kilometers an hour or something like that. So even compared to the 262, it was not really very fast. But I think the sense of urgency for the Allies at this time was pretty low. Like they weren't going all out to try and make a war-winning jet fighter, because they'd essentially already won the war at this stage. So this was more of a taking your time kind of proof of concept experiment, and it worked very well. It's a good looking plane, isn't it? So there we go. Those are all of the planes in IL-2 1946. Thanks for watching.